Bill 59, first I want to appreciate the efforts of the conferees, delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Sullivan, the Delegate Peace, the former chairman of Transportation Appropriations on this. Metro is a critical infrastructure for Northern Virginia and indeed for the entire Commonwealth. With passage of the bill this week in this chamber, and with that I want to acknowledge the efforts of the chairman of Appropriations, the bill that he passed on that. With this bill, these two bills combined, will provide $154 million bondable, renewable monies to Metro. It'll provide $15 million to VRE, Virginia Rail Express, and $7.85 million to PRTC. One of the things that when we brought this bill originally to the floor, we said is that we would not raise taxes and we would not go into other people's areas in other parts of the state. This has been accomplished by redirecting monies from other multitude of other sources to Metro. But again, in this bill, there's no new taxes. As important to the funding of Metro are the reforms. Metro has long been plagued by excessive costs and escalating budgets. Reforms in this bill seek to rein in the costs and induce a fiscal responsibility that has been sorely lacking over the years. Again, a number of the things here, Mr. Speaker, pertaining to the reforms provision requiring the operating system of Metro cannot increase more than 3% annually. At times, they've been at 9 and 10%. If the operating expense assistance increases by more than 3%, then CTB shall withhold 35% of funding. WMATA must recreate a capital improvement plan. Stipulates that only appointed WMATA board members may take action, not their alternates. There's a 20% penalty if the alternates participate at board meetings. Establishes that Northern Virginia Transportation Commission report to the governor and the General Assembly on the financial performance of Metro, financial performance of bus, strategies to reduce cost, and measures to improve overall safety. Get this. One of the things from my Prince William colleagues, there was a question about the transfer of the Grand Tours tax. The Grand Tours tax money for Prince William, that portion will stay in Prince William. It will not go to NVTC. I apologize, that was an amendment that came late last night, but the monies for Grand Tours that was being transferred from NVTA, that portion that was Prince William's monies will stay in Prince William as long as it's used for transportation purposes. So we have that. We have also in there, this bill does not go into effect if Maryland and the district do not come up with additional monies. And I hope it be the will of the body to pass the bill.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the conference report.
Delegate has the floor.
Briefly, Mr. Speaker, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, Delegate Hugo did a nice job describing the bill, and like him, I want to thank him and Delegate Peace for doing a terrific job on this conference report, as well as our colleagues down the hall. I just want to remind people of two things. One, this bill will set the bar. This will send a signal to Maryland and D.C. that they have to step up and do their part. And as Delegate Hugo pointed out, if they don't, the bill has triggers in it so that we will not be doing more than our share. But what this says to Maryland and Virginia to Maryland and D.C. is that Virginia is leading the way and they need to step up. Secondly, I just want to make this point. Whether you have a Metro stop in your district or not, whether any of your constituents ever ride the Metro or not, Metro is a crucial piece of transportation infrastructure to everyone in the Commonwealth, just like our airports and our port. So everyone in this room and every constituent represented in this room has a stake in the success of Metro. And this bill is an important part of reforming Metro and of funding it off into the future. So I urge a green vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Lyman, Delegate LaRocque.
Question for the patron, Mr. Speaker.
Will the delegate from Fairfax yield for a question?
Mr. Speaker, I yield.
Delegate yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think the two components of this that will potentially disproportionately impact Loudoun County are one, how the NVTA monies are being allocated. So I would ask the patron what percentage of monies are being redirected to become dedicated transit funding for the metro system.
Mr. Speaker, I will tell the gentleman that $20 million from NVTA goes to the WMATA Capital Fund. NVTA revenues to WMATA also for $27.12 million from the localities. In addition, the Grand Tours, not Prince William, it will be about $44 million. Mr. Speaker, I would also say one of the things that CTB has done within the last year is they've reverted. NVTA was going to have to pick up over $300 million project for 28 and 66 in Northern Virginia that benefits the whole region. It was the #1 congestion project within the Commonwealth. That money now is being paid by the outside 66 Beltway project, so NVTA did not have to pay that money to build that project and upgrade that interchange at 28 and 66. So NVTA's got a big plus this year. In addition, because of the outside the Beltway project, there's about $500 million worth of projects across the Northern Virginia region that are going to be funded. So NVTA got a $330 million plus up this year when the money it was just intended to spend didn't have to be done. So that's why we thought everybody has to, and there's a lot, everybody is pitching in a little bit on this. And again, it was accomplished, and I know it was something the gentleman was always interested in, not raising taxes on our constituents anymore.
Follow-up question, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate yield for another question.
I say the patron
Delegate
is quite correct that I'm interested in not raising taxes, but also perhaps more relevant to this is interested in utilizing existing tax streams, revenue streams, efficiently and wisely. As you know, the funding for the Metro project that has been contributed by Loudoun County up until now has been proportioned to Loudoun based on the WMATA funding formula. So I asked the patron, will the funding that is established by 1539 reflect that same funding formula, which is basically a formula that is a ratio of a variety of things, including number of stations, ridership, and things, which are reflective of the amount of the system which is in Loudoun County and the level of use. So will this funding formula take that percentage of use and percentage of the system which is in Loudoun County into consideration, and is this funding reflective of that same use ratio?
I would say to the gentleman in response, Mr. Speaker, that the numbers that I laid out with the monies coming out of NVTA are going to be static numbers, and so that money will come off the top. I will check with you later to find out how that would impact, but these monies come out of NVTA. They come out of other resources in Northern Virginia. And then again, the gentleman from Suffolk brought legislation earlier in the week that brings the other monies to Metro, VRE, and PRTC. So you're asking, there may be some changes, there may be some lessening of the money. Some of the monies, yes, but of all things, Loudoun is getting a huge, and deservedly so, we'll say, benefit from this Metro project that goes out to the airport and beyond.
Mr. Chairman, speaking to the bill, briefly I would say...
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Briefly I would say that while it's difficult to analyze a 25-page substitute in the few minutes that, the short time it's been posted, I would say that the answers, although they were rather lengthy, I believe the answers really make it clear that Loudoun County is going to pay a very disproportionate share of a system, so that perhaps is of concern to the minority of delegates who are here who represent Loudoun County. It's a big, big hit for Loudoun County. Loudoun County needs roads. I appreciate the statement that implies that the metro system is owned by the Commonwealth, but the Commonwealth isn't funding the metro system through this bill. It is the few localities that are served by the metro, and the funding is not reflective of the amount of use. So to the delegates from Loudoun County, you may want to take that into consideration. Unfortunately, we are a minority, and I believe that as this bill passes, we will be a minority that is affected very adversely by the passage of the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Prince William, Delegate Rome.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the patron resume the floor for a friendly question?
The delegate from Fairfax yield for a question.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Delegate yields. It's a friendly question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll just ask the patron. We had received just an email from the Prince William folks back home, and they just wanted to ask, they said, please request an explanation and assurance from the conferees that funds generated in non-metro member jurisdictions are not going to WMATA. Could the delegate just address that?
I'd be happy to address the delegate from Prince William. That's the point I was making about the Grand Tours tax. There was a question about that. Originally, all the Grand Tours tax from NVTA was going. An amendment put in last night. We discussed it with the senator from Fairfax, Senator Barker, would say that those monies, that Grand Tours tax monies generated in Prince William, Manassas Park, and Manassas will stay in those jurisdictions, and that if that money is spent on transportation projects.
Great. And Mr. Speaker, just one follow-up friendly question.
With delegate yield for another question.
I yield.
Delegate yields.
Thank you. And so the second part that they had asked with was that the bill does not harm the NVTA. What we were just talking about here is that it seems that especially with the $300 million, dealing with the 6628 intersection, that coming from the 66 project in and of itself, that should, and with what the delegate from Suffolk had dealt with in the floor tax, or on the floor of the funding bill, it seems that in aggregate, the MVTA is not going to take a substantial, major hit on this thing. And I was just hoping that the delegate from Fairfax could speak to that.
I mean,
Mr.
Speaker, NVTA, I mean, direct, some of these monies do come out of NVTA. There's no doubt about that. But what the point I was trying to make with the money that NVTA has picked up because of the I-66 project is that I think they're in a good position to continue on. I'm a member of NVTA. I'm on the board. So I think NVTA remains in a good position to provide good, common sense advice and funding on many road projects within the Northern Virginia region.
I thank the delegate.
Delegate from Spotsylvania, Delegate Cole.
Would the patron yield for a question?
The delegate from Fairfax yield for another question.
Be delighted.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I'd heard rumors earlier that due to several localities that are in PRTC and VRE that are not serviced by Metro, there were concerns that funds were going to be raided from the VRE tax, which again was affected by the gentleman from Suffolk's legislation establishing a floor. And I just want to confirm that none of the VRE funds are going to be basically redistributed, that nothing is changing as far as the formula for VRE and the localities that participate in it.
It's in response to the gentleman, to the delegate from Stafford. Let me say, VRE on two pots. VRE is $4.85 million to VRE new monies based on formula. PRTC. VRE also gets 10.15 based on formula, 7.85 to PRTC jurisdictions based on formula.
Follow-up question.
Delegate yield for another question.
Indeed.
Delegate
Yes.
yields.
I thank the gentleman for sharing figures and not answering my question, but I renew my question. Does any of the existing formulas, as far as the localities that participate in VRE, those funds are distributed by a current formula, regardless of the level of money collected? Are any of those formulas changing?
Mr. Speaker, I was attempting to answer the best of my limited abilities, obviously, and the numbers I were given were the additional monies. What I was attempting to convey to the gentleman is we're not changing the formulas.
All right, thank you.
Shall the conference report be adopted? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 93, noes 1.
Ayes 93, noes 1. The conference report is adopted.